Power to the people.
Power to the people.
I'm very proud and honored to be among those that Paul Street has allowed to think with him about what an authentic left would look like in the United States. It's something that many of us are thinking about all the time. I think that this authentic left initially would look exactly like it does now, because you have to start from where you are. But it would begin to start talking and behaving quite differently. I think what we are really talking about is how do we make a movement, a ruling class destroying movement in the United States. That's a simple proposition, and I think certain things flow from that proposition. Of course, we would be talking about setting in motion several mass-based movements that are linked in their shared enemy, the ruling class and its organs of coercion and control, the organs that people come up against every time they move, and even if they don't move. And these mechanisms of coercion and control are more than just the police and the mass incarceration gulag. They are more than just those police and jails plus the vast national security state. It is also the corporate media, which in the last 2 years, certainly, we have witnessed, we have learned how they work hand in glove with the U.S. domestic and international spy agencies. That is obviously what is going down with this Russiagate hysteria. The unity of the oligarchy and the corporate media and the national security state is perfectly personified in the person of Jeff Bezos, the Amazon owner, and also owner of the Washington Post, whose company has a $600 million contract with the CIA. Bezos is the richest man in the world. He and two other oligarchs, Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, own more wealth than the entire poorest half of the American population. And that is the kind of oligarchic fact that is becoming commonly known out there in this vast 300 million person country, that these three people have more money than all of half of them. These are monopolists. They are the masters of what they themselves call creative destruction, which is a very grotesque way of them bragging about the huge disruptions that hyperactive capital is causing in U.S. society, and of course much greater destruction in the global South. The concentration of capital in the U.S. and the global capitalist world has reached such a point that the individuals at the top of the oligarchy, the men and the few white women who are named Walton, can be counted on our fingers. We know most of their names, and much of the public knows most of their names. That is the state of concentration that we have reached. The heads of the big banks that are the queen ants of finance capital, and finance capital is the enemy of all mankind. Those banks, and some of the heads of those banks, but those banks can be listed, counted on the fingers of one hand. The crisis of late-stage capitalism is all around us, and the people know that the overlapping crises are in motion. They see it all around them. Even those who still have good jobs see the crisis in motion. They talk about it, even if it has not devastated them personally yet. There is fear everywhere in the United States, even among those classes of people who on paper seem to be looking good, especially if they are two good job households. The people also know the names of the oligarchs at the top of the list, many of those names. Most importantly, everybody knows that the banks are criminals. And everybody hates the banks. And that is not a hyperbolic statement. I'll say it again. Everybody, or virtually everybody, hates the banks.
Yeah.
The only hatred that rivals in the United States, the only hatred that rivals the hatred of the banks, is the hatred and fear of black people and Muslims and Latino immigrants in U.S. society. But the second biggest hatred is the hatred of the banks, and that's the one we got to work on. And in fact, hatred of the banks is damn near universal in that it is pervasive among all groups in this society, including even many upper-income whites. Right-wing libertarian Republicans, who actually do have representation in Congress, hate the bankers, who occupy an especially evil place in their worldview. I don't pretend to understand their worldview in its intricacies, but in that worldview they hate the bankers, and I suspect that anti-Semitism has something to do with that, since they think that these evil bankers are almost entirely Jewish. But they do hate the banks. And that is what is most important today. They think, anyway, the hatred of bankers is everywhere in the country. So, if that is the case, and it is, how much imagination does it take to imagine a new 21st century U.S. left? A real left wants to overthrow the ruling class, which is centered, of course, in finance capital. The people, in their multi-splendored, multi-culti magnificence, hate the banks. Therefore, a real left mass movement for the 21st century must call for nationalization of the banks. That is the logic of history. Now, I said nationalize. That means state takeover. It does not mean a temporary takeover, but a permanent takeover of the banks. We're not talking about just cleaning the crooks out and then giving the banks back to the finance capitalist class, as if there aren't crooks ready to come right back and do the same thing. We're talking about dethroning the bankers. That is, we are making what is in fact a revolutionary demand, but one that I am confident is actually a popular demand. In fact, as I said, I think there is no more popular demand than smashing the power of the banks. I think that the genuine left response to this era of crisis is really not so complex. It's not so problematic as some people think that it is. Movements are defined by their demands. If they're not defined by their demands, then we're just talking about some kind of left of positioning. I'm going to put myself over here next to that group and hope that that will cause these other groups to join me because we're a little better than that other group. That's positioning. It's meaningless, but that's what we do most of the time. No, we must make a demand that goes to the heart of the actual situation, and this happens to be a demand that resonates with the vast majority of people. I didn't say that we should turn Goldman Sachs over to its workers as a cooperative, as I've heard some folks say. I think that is silly. Goldman Sachs and these other monster banks are instruments that have been crafted only for the purpose of the oppression of humankind. That is their one and only purpose. And you might just as well say that you'll solve the race to nuclear annihilation by turning the U.S. strategic triad over to the airmen and sailors and soldiers that man these weapon systems. That is silly and stupid as well. We want to nationalize the banks and put those banks to public purposes. And if that does not sound sexy enough, then it doesn't sound real sexy. If it doesn't sound sexy enough as a slogan, then we'll have to put the mighty meme makers like Rebel Diaz to the task of sexing and sloganizing it up, and I know that they can do it, because it is a popular demand, and they'll make it work. It is a demand that the Occupy movement never made back in 2011. They walked right up to the edge of the pool, but they did not dive in. I don't know why they didn't dive in, but they never did. The core group of Occupy did other silly things. They invited black Obamite preachers into the movement. I know when they did it, one of the central organizers called me up and said he was going to invite Reverend Ben Chavis to become part of the movement. I told him Reverend Ben Chavis wrote a column every week for a black newspaper, and the column was all about backing Obama, voting for the Democrats, and that's your mission, and that's all. But they went ahead and did it anyway. I have no idea why they did that. But much of the co-optation that occurred with the Occupy movement was self-inflicted. Of course, it was state-sponsored as well. Of course, we know that Obama himself directed the ultimate police crackdown, but there were contradictions at the core in the Occupy movement. But the greatest failing was not to jump into the pool. Nevertheless, they left us with a slogan that has popularized the common sentiment, the hatred of the damn banks that was common in 2011 and came to the fore when the 99% slogan was promulgated, and people should have jumped into the pool. But we've had time to ruminate and refine that 99%. It's had time to percolate among the masses now that it had a number to it, and they knew that they were somewhere in that number, and I guess that's a good thing. Well, it might as well be a good thing, because we can't recoup that 7 years, but we can start right now by diving into the pool. It's not going to be easy to co-opt demands for the permanent nationalization of the banks. There's not much room for the Democratic Party to come into that and somehow get on the side of that kind of movement that's demanding the nationalization and dethronement of their masters, because the banking system, the Wall Street bankers are to the Democratic Party what big energy has historically been to the Republican Party. These are the pillars of these corporate parties. We will see what the relationship of forces really looks like. That is, the relationship of forces in society, not the relationship of organizations that call themselves left, but how people move in society when the demand is forcefully and effectively made abroad. We'll see what the relationship of forces really looks like in the United States when the left is pushing a demand that is truly popular on its face and truly transformative as well. The trick, the real hard part here is in projecting what takes the place of the private bankers, the so-called Wall Street banks. It is absolutely crucial that the projected new banking configuration, the one that we say will come about in the future as a result of these demands, that new configuration be seen by the people as providing all of the services that the private bankers currently provide, and those services that they used to provide, and many of us remember, but no longer do. Because there will be great anxiety in the land when people think about where are we going to put our money now, the little that we have. And that transformed public banking system will have to be seen as part of the rebuilding of the nation. It is part of the rebuilding project, which is a transformational rebuilding project. And it must be seen that the new regime of development of the nation, that's the rebuilding project, will be a democratic one. And there is room there for all of the debate that we can possibly think we will have. What does a democratic society look like? That is the debate that follows, that flows from we're going to take over this banking system. And that redevelopment would have to be one that is in service of all the constituencies in the United States. And all of these constituencies, as I said before, hate the banks, and all of them do want transformation there in terms that they can understand. This is especially important to Black Americans, and Black Americans will be the most enthusiastic constituency about smashing the banks. Black Americans are the most left-leaning constituency in the United States. They are most in favor by every measurement of redistribution of income, and they are the most opposed to monopoly in the United States. The bankers and the real estate corporations are the ones who created the ghettos, and everybody knows that. Everybody in the ghetto knows it. And they are also the engines of gentrification, and everybody Black understands that as well. There is no need to demonize the bankers in Black America. But what you do have to show Black America is that this transformed institution is going to be not just of service to them, but that they will have a say in these transformed institutions. That in our language, that there will be a self-determinationist aspect to the reorganization of the banks in this country. If we are ever to see a real working unity between Blacks and Latinos on the ground, it will be in common opposition to the bankers who are behind gentrification. And gentrification is not just happening in a couple of selected places. Here in New York City, we know where the centers of gentrification are as it moves through the different places in the boroughs and to a lesser extent across the river in New Jersey. But what I've found is that most folks who are under the hammer and threat of gentrification think that it is an isolated situation. They think that this is happening just particularly hard in St. Louis or in Atlanta or in Chicago. But in fact, it's happening everywhere. The banking class, if that's what you want to call them, is on the move with the same plan everywhere in the United States, inflating land assets through gentrification. And the growing Latino populations are moving into or getting moved out of the same neighborhoods as Black people. And the commonality there is real, it is day to day, it cries out for collaboration. But I think that can be best achieved in a general movement to smash the banks. And we will see the kind of unity of action among Latinos and Blacks that many of us have been wishing for, been frustrated about for a very long time. Several movements would be spawned by this demand for nationalization of the banks. In the last 2 years, it has become absolutely clear to masses of people that the concentrated capital in the Silicon Valley, and we're talking about Google and Facebook and Amazon and other corporations in that industry, is a danger to democracy. It is a danger to the people. It is a growing danger that people are beginning to recognize, and that's not going to go away. And so we need to be talking about what I think organically a demand for intervention in those monopolies who are politically so dangerous, but will also grow out of a demand to nationalize the banks. And in fact, the list of struggles that would grow out of this central intervention is quite a long one, and there's no need for me to elaborate on it. In fact, it hurts my brain thinking about it. So we'll talk, and I think we'll have a chance to talk about these questions further in this panel. So power to the people.
Very next, we have 2 minutes. This is going to be a lightning round, thank God, and I won't even have time to catch my breath. So, it's going to be me, because I won, me, Our Lady of Perpetual PMS, versus Carrie, the winner from the first round. This is the third round. This decides it. That's it. Thank you for your support. I'm going to grab a quick drink of water, and I'm handing the mic back over to Insane Clown Posse. Thank you. Ready?
All right, this is a
Lightning round.
Lightning round. All or nothing. Get ready to get bloody. 1, 2, 3. Oh, they both took a tumble.
Blood. I need more blood.
More blood is needed.
You're fired. You suck. More tissue. More tissue.
More blood is needed.
Carrie!
Oh, that's gotta hurt. Oh, whoa! Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh, she's turned into a vampire. Carrie's looking awfully scary. Whoa, look out! Our liability insurance is the cheapest available. Please watch your head. Just kidding, it's the best. The best. Whoa! And Carrie's on her back. And Carrie's on her stomach. And she's getting spanked.
Plug it up, bitch!
Oh!
Body slam again. Beat Perpetual. You gotta beat that. Beat Perpetual.
PMS has been out of control today, but is it a match for Carrie? Who will know? Oh! Oh!
Never
Have some mercy!
the power of PMS!
And PMS is on her back.
On my ovaries again.
PMS is not only being attacked by Carrie, she's also being attacked by her ovaries. Damaged ovaries.
The fuck am I doing? I can just...
Oh no! She's using her telekinesis.
I'm pinning myself into submission. Oh, okay.
Oh my God! Carrie's taking out PMS.
That's it. That's it.
And 1, 2, 3. And the winner is Carrie.
Oh my God.
Thank you so much, folks.
Hey, thanks everybody. I called for no shanks and no shivs. I forgot to say no telekinesis. Thank you for attending this edition of Glob. Thank you to everyone in the park. Enjoy the rest of the bands. See you later.
Why are you the first band? You're asking me. What?
Get the fuck up! Go! Yeah, I'm gonna tell you all something. It's about 10 people living their lives that shine. But it is life and it's gay. If you feel that day, it's gay.
picnics in the park and a free tour of the zoo. It's like a circus hit time. It's gonna be